Good Sunday morning. Today we're gonna have a shorter, I don't say lighter, but less mathematical overview on the topic of AI safety. It's an interesting one, I think, for a number of reasons. I think a lot of folks are interested in running models, and a subset of folks are interested in running models, and a lot of folks are interested in fine tuning or building their own models, especially building their own models. But I have to say, most people in the world, if you look at it by the numbers, very few people are going to be building models. A slightly larger proportion of people are going to be fine tuning models. And then um, I think a couple of people will be using them themselves in their applications or integrating them into systems or things like that. But the topic of safety will apply to everybody. These large language models and whatnot are all the way out there, and so it's just that people are gonna be exposed to them day to day, and this is why the topic of safety, I think, is so important. It's that whether you're involved in the model development or not, the topic of AI safety will impact your life in some way or another. So the best example I can put is that there are a number of leaders in the political space that I know. They're not technical, they're not coding models, they don't work at big tech companies, but they're going to have a huge influence on model safety, either through policy or through, at some point, there may be legislation or bills or things that you as citizens in wherever country you're in uh, will be asked to opine on or vote on as part of your citizenship. So what I wanted to do in this particular book club session is I'm going to show you actually why I particularly picked model safety today, and then a list of resources. This might be one of our shorter sessions. I'm just going to take you through a list of resources, show you why they're there, and then leave that there for you. So let's jump to it. As always, there isn't a good central book for these things yet, so I have to always write my own for now, which is good. I get to learn more. But let me talk through this. So we just did the overview, why safety is a core concern. Also, that safety is multifaceted, that there's numerous aspects and parties that are involved in AI safety, whether that's the people that are building the models, the people that are making policies, even yourself as somebody that is exposed to the outputs, or whether the outputs of the models themselves, or whether that be by choice or as part of some greater system. The challenge I have with AI safety is it's such a broad concept that it gets really muddled. People talk about AGI safety, they talk about bias, and I don't want to say any discussion is a bad discussion, but all the discussions largely stay in sort of an abstract space with ideas that are so big that it can be hard to feel like you're going to be able to make any sort of difference, or for you to be able to know where to lean in depending on where you're at. So what I decided to do is I wanted to just talk about bicycle safety for a second. The reason I want to do that is that there's some objects in our lives, like bicycles, that we just take for granted, that they're just there, right? We just sort of take for granted that you can go to a store, buy a bike, and we've been conditioned with the norms and expectations of bicycle safety for probably our entire lives, right? As a child, either seeing it on TV, seeing how people ride bicycles, or being told to wear a helmet, so on and so forth. But if you think about it like really, really deeply, nothing around bicycles was set in stone, right? The bicycles themselves are frankly a very new technology. They've only existed again for 100 years, and humans have been around for a lot longer than that. So all the norms and safety rules around bicycles were developed in the last 100 years. The other thing about bicycle safety is it's so multifaceted. So let's say you go to a store and buy a bike, and then you get injured, right? Who's at fault if you get injured on that bicycle? And it suddenly becomes a complex problem. Like, was the bike constructed safely? If it was poor design, or they used poor metal, or somebody welded knives to the bike, so when you fell, you hurt yourself, that's clearly the manufacturer's fault. But if you were in a bike path that's protected and a car driver came and hit you, it clearly would be the car driver's fault. But if this road you're riding on was constructed poorly, then that may be the city's fault for not designing proper bike infrastructure. But if it was nighttime and you didn't have a light, it could be your fault. So if you just think about bicycles, right, it suddenly becomes such a complicated problem to decide who's at fault and who's responsible for safety on a bicycle. Is it yourself? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the person who designed the area around the bicycle? And then you have to think about, even on top of that, like, were you using the bicycle in the right environment? If you buy a bicycle for a child, like a toddler, and you decide to go mountain biking on it, that was clearly your problem. You didn't pick up a bicycle that was suited for your age or your size, and you were using it in an environment that it was never intended to be in. I don't think there's any toddler level category for mountain bikes. And if I just stretch this analogy for another, let's say, another minute or two. Now with bicycles, there's different categories of bicycles. If we Google it, I won't do it right now. But there's bicycles that are meant for paved roads. There's bicycles that are meant for paved roads and gravel. And then at the extreme end, I think it's category 5 or category 6 bicycles that are meant for extreme downhill riding. And these ideas of different grades, again, didn't come out of nowhere. It became a standard that was developed by manufacturers and by people for the intent of helping people use bicycles safely. At the very tail end of this analogy, if somebody gets hurt on a bicycle, we also have a very rigorous legal structure for deciding who ultimately is at fault. Because if I'm on a bicycle and I get hit by a car, our legal structure is pretty well set up to, well, in many countries for sure, but I'm pretty sure all countries. I know in the US for certain, if you get hit, there's a clear set of rules and laws, and lawyers and judges in the legal system has a good way of deciding who is at fault and in what degree and what should happen. And there's insurance and things like that. We have all these structures built up. When it comes to artificial intelligence, though, and these models, we don't have a lot of that, right? So we're still deciding at the very forefront who's responsible for what parts. Is the model company responsible? The vendor? Is the government? Is it the individual user's choice? It's very mixed, and a lot of folks are coming up with different perspectives on the same problem. Should the models be safe by design, or should other organizations are taking the idea that they should release just a model and leave the safety up to the user entirely? The government, frankly, is figuring this out on the fly. And the other challenge is we don't know the categories of models yet, which we'll talk about in a second. So we're at a certain level with model performance, but it increases so fast that the categories are being developed on the fly, and we aren't able to test or even know what those may look like. So in my head these days, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to frame this. Whenever I hear anything about model safety or model risk, I try and frame it about what would happen if this was not a model but a bicycle. So you can read through this, talked about all the considerations. Who's responsible? Is it the manufacturer, myself, the government? Who's providing the bicycle? Another interesting thing about models versus bicycles is when I buy a bicycle, it stays the same. I know this sounds stupid, but like when I buy my bike, I have 2 of them in my garage. They have not changed in 10 years. They're literally the exact same bicycles. But with models, it's very challenging, especially if it's a model that's deployed from another company. Like, you don't know what that model is, and that model changes over time. And so you may get used to using it safely in a certain context and feel like it is the proper model for whatever your needs are, right? But it could change, and then it becomes a question. Now it's unsafe, but because it's suddenly transformed into something else. The way I've been thinking about this, it's as if I buy a bicycle and I buy a bicycle helmet. But one day I wake up and my bicycle has turned into a motorcycle and I haven't changed my helmet. That's very dangerous, right? You need a helmet, a different helmet for a motorcycle, and a different road, and a different sense of I don't say different sense of responsibility, but like more awareness, because there's much more harm that could happen and risk on a motorcycle than a bicycle. But you never wake up one day and your bicycle turns into a motorcycle. But with some of these models, that's actually what might happen, to be quite frank. Like something that was low powered could suddenly be changed for something that's very high powered, and you wouldn't know the difference. So with it, this is what I struggle with in the concept of AI safety, even though I work in the field. This is the analogy that I'm using, and I'm trying to tie it to other things like bicycles to provide a concrete reference. Otherwise, it becomes so overwhelming that it's challenging to understand where to even attack this problem, or not even like conceptualize it in your head. I hope that helps. So with that, also in this guidebook, I wanted to give you a list of resources and actually talk about why I decided to pick AI safety as a whole. It's been a big topic. I work in trust and safety professionally, and so I see this stuff day to day. But there was a particular book that just came out. It's called The Coming Wave, and it's from this guy named Mustafa Suleiman. I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly. You may not know exactly who this guy is, but the thing you do know is he was the founder of DeepMind, which didn't actually do the transformer technologies, but was part of the AGI group and Google that released transformers and made this whole thing happen. So it's fair to say that Mustafa is a pretty influential guy in the field of artificial intelligence. It's this guy right here. I'll just read off his bio. He's the co-founder of one of the new startups, Inflection AI. It's a smaller one that not as many people know about. But he and the founder of LinkedIn, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, have their own AI startup. But he also was the co-founder of DeepMind and been a leader in the field since like 2010. So he's a very well-respected figure from folks in the industry. And certainly someone that has a lot of experience and influence in this particular field. So he just wrote a book. It just came out 3 weeks ago, talking about book clubs. And he paints a very compelling case about this dual wave technology that's coming through. And so one of them obviously is AI, as we're in this book club. The other one he points out is synthetic biology. And I won't talk too much about the synthetic biology aspects, but his argument essentially, in all fairness, is that AI is increasing rapidly, which we know as part of this book club, but also synthetic biology is increasing rapidly. I'm not an expert in synthetic biology, but I have seen headlines about CRISPR and gene editing, and certainly with mRNA and other medical technologies we've seen that have been useful in COVID. It seems to me that there is a coming wave as well. So what he's saying is that both of these waves are coming at the same time. They're both accelerating exponentially, and so the world is going to rapidly change in the next 5 to 10 years. He then points out that these two waves could be unsafe, and they could cause a lot of. There's a narrow path, as he says, where humanity could end up a lot better, but it's a cliff. So if we go one way or another way, things could become challenging, and things could become harmful. So that's a lot of the thesis of his book. Towards the end, once he's provided this sort of compelling sort of call to action, there's two things. One is he has like a 9 or 10 step plan on what it would take to contain the waves in a way that it would be useful for humanity. So I won't go through again all 10 things right now. If you're interested, I encourage you to read the book. But there was one paragraph in there that I found quite compelling, in that he points out that in AI safety, there are very few people in proportion. There are proportionally few people working in AI safety as AI as a whole, and he pegs a number at around like less than 1%. He uses a comparative example from, I believe, rockets, where it was a similar number, but he certainly says that it's below 10% of people, or 10% of resources are being used for AI safety. So that definitely like kicked off that that I should write one section in the book about this. Um, the other thing, I want to point out, which is happening with other organizations, is Anthropic, which is a company we've talked about before and which we're going to talk about in a second, is fully dedicated to AI safety. It's like in their core mission that is their goal. OpenAI is dedicating 20% of their resources to what they're calling super alignment as a sort of focused safety effort, and they just released a red teaming announcement as part of their again ongoing work. So they have a lot of resources put into AI safety. Google does as well. They have an entire trust and safety department that works on AI safety, among many other things, along with a responsible AI group. And I can keep saying the same about every single company. So Inflection AI, obviously, which is the company that Mustafa here has created. He didn't say this in particular in his book, but given that he wrote an entire book about AI safety and he's the CEO of Inflection AI, I would assume he's also really into AI safety. So in all the large organizations, AI safety continues to be an ongoing topic. So what is happening in the rest of this guide is I'm now linking AI safety from various perspectives. So as we just talked about in the motivating problem, there's a group of people in the world that are model builders. They're mathematicians, or they work at like OpenAI or Google or things like that, and they're responsible for building the model. But there's a much wider group of people that are responsible for making the models safe. I shouldn't say making the model safe, but related to aspects of AI safety. So obvious ones are the government, which we'll talk about in a second, and also independent researchers and assessors. So in the world of safety, like nearly all safety, the people building something like, let's say, a bicycle helmet, they're responsible for making a safe helmet, but then they end up testing that helmet with independent organizations like the Department of Transportation or other folks that are checking for safety. In the mechanical world, UL, Underwriters Laboratory, if I remember the name correctly, they're the ones that are checking that your toaster is safe and that your iron is your like clothes iron is safe, because in the past these things were dangerous, like vacuums and clothes irons and toasters. They would cause fires, they would draw too much current, people go to get hurt, people would die. And so now there is a extensive group of third-party companies and organizations that test day-to-day appliances. And that's the third group that I want to talk about here. And lastly, I want to talk about the history. So going through this again, what I've listed here is resources from various perspectives, any order that I think you could read them. So the first one is Concrete Problems in AI Safety. This is written by folks that are in the industry. It was written in 2016. So in terms of artificial intelligence and timing, this is ancient, even before transformers were designed and released, or even literally invented at all. These folks wrote about AI safety and why it's hard and certain challenges with it. They use a really nice example of a cleaning robot and the various ways in which a cleaning robot could go wrong. And notably, it's a paper written across OpenAI and Google, which you have in 2016. So at the beginning, before this recent wave of generative AI. Also, first author is Dario Amodei. He is the CEO of Anthropic. So you'll see again him come back later. It's a short paper. It also has been revisited in 2022 or 2021, I think. So it's a good one to just get acclimated and familiar before, especially what this looked like before this whole hype train started in recent times. The next one is this paper written by an independent organization called Trail of Bits. So Trail of Bits is a cybersecurity company. They've been doing cybersecurity, I think, since like 2009 or 2010. And their focus has been on even just application security and things like that. But there's been quite a nice paper written by this person named Heidi. And she talks about the terminology in AI safety, why it could be wrong, and a framework for thinking about AI safety. The reason I suggest this as the third paper to read is when you're reading AI safety stuff, like about super alignment or other topics, it can, with everything going on and all the new words, it can be hard to figure out what exactly is happening. And certainly the person writing it has a bias to write about safety from the perspective that they're coming from. This company, which has not developed the model, comes from the perspective of just they want the terminology to be clear, and then a framework that covers a multidisciplinary framework that covers various aspects of AI safety, not just Gen AI. So this is a good second read because it really forces you to think about AI safety as a whole. And given that it's more modern, it gives you an explanation of why the current terminology around AI safety is particularly loaded, and maybe even potentially ineffective. So Heidi here brings up a good point about a value alignment and safety not being the same thing. And you'll see a lot in the AI space currently right now about AI being safe because it's aligned with humans. So pretty compelling picture of why that is not the case. The next is the blueprint for AI Bill of Rights. This comes from the US White House. So the reason I bring this in is this again was released actually before ChatGPT, which is always a notable thing to say. But it comes from the perspective of the government. And the AI Bill of Rights is modeled after the US Bill of Rights, obviously one of the founding documents of at least my country. And I'd say two things. One is, again, written from a government perspective. It provides a very different viewpoint than what somebody who's working in industry would say. It also is focused on you as the user. So this is the document. A lot of documents focus on AI and the model and what needs to be done to make the model safe. This one takes a very citizen level approach. So what can you as a person I'm not even showing my screen. What can you as a person do about AI? And what can you, what expectations did you have? And so for a lot of folks who aren't necessarily so interested in the model details or alignment or things like that, this one is better written for what you should, things for you to think about as a user for what you may want out of these systems. The last one I put on here is Anthropic's responsible scaling policy. So Anthropic comes up over and over again. They're a company that's focused on safety. Dario in 2016 writing a paper on AI safety. This is clearly something that he is continuing to work on over the last at least 7 years, although I know it's longer than that. The reason this is the last one is this is the one that takes the most future-looking perspective. So this one, again, was only released like 2 weeks ago. I think September 17th, September 19th. So we're in October. It like less than 3 weeks ago, this was just put out there. What it contains internally is it contains a roadmap of how, of specifically how Anthropic thinks that model capability is going to increase with rough timelines, but also strict boundaries. So now this one takes a future-looking perspective of here we are at ASL2, Automated Systems Level 2, AI Safety Levels Level 2, and then what would happen at 3 and 4. What's even telling in this paper more than anything is the level of it's right here, speculation that's going on. So even people that are literal experts that have been working on this for over a decade are still trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen and how they would test for it. So here, deployment and containment. Containment being a word we see very often. I see containment was used in Mustafa's book as well. Containment being risks that arise from just having one of these large models. So the reason, again, this being is the last one is that it takes a big future-looking perspective, and then with you building up the knowledge from the previous readings about the history, where these things started from, the broader view from the Coming Wave book. Coming to this gives a good another playbook that it looks like at least Anthropic will be taking and assuring and testing their own models. So that's all I have for today. I didn't want to go into each one. Oh, actually, I want to bring one last thing. Is that John Carmack, who is a very notable programmer, made Doom, but has worked on a lot of projects. Who also he just started his own company, AGI company, called Keen Technologies, based a play on his game Commander Keen. It's a really good game in the early 1990s. He disagrees with Mustafa, and so it's also fascinating how leaders in the industry, folks that are push the state of computation forward in one way or another, they're also not totally aligned on how they want to build and move this technology. This is one example here. Another big example is Anthropic breaking off from OpenAI. Dario used to work at OpenAI, and he split and created Anthropic with its express purpose of safety being one of its core tenets. So clearly a split in vision there. It is my suggestion to you is, even if one of these folks is a really big expert in the field of AI and AI safety, it's always relevant to go look at other leaders and other folks outside of the AI building space, because I have to bring it back to it being everybody that is focused and working on this. It's not just model builders, one or two or five of them. It's the government who has a perspective, you as yourselves that have a perspective, companies that are deploying AI on their own that have a perspective. So with this list of resources, should be everything you need, or at least everything you need to get started in AI safety. This is something that you don't need to have a fancy computer, GPU, data, know how these models work to get involved in. So my biggest push to you, just like I got a nudge from many others, is if you're interested in this at all, definitely jump in. It has a lower barrier of entry. It's definitely going to affect you, and everyone has a voice in the matter. So I don't see anything in the chat. No questions or anything like that. Maybe just a quiet week. For the coming weeks at the book club, I'll ask folks what they want to see. So I'll send out an email to the email list. What's next? Let's see. Oh, Nitesh. Okay. I guess my YouTube is a little slow sometimes. Whew. Yes. I super encourage you to look into it. So good to know that someone's here. Yeah, I encourage you to look into it, and I'll give one more pitch on why. So since we're here, I'll give you one last pitch, and then we'll go to the book club. If you want to get started in model development and things like that, you have to have a lot of resources, right? Like you have to have a computer first off, know how to program, know a lot about a lot of the stuff here, how transformers work, fine-tuning, evaluation, know how a library works, Hugging Face, like the Hugging Face libraries or any one of the other ones. But to get started in AI safety, I don't want to say you don't need to know a lot. Actually, I want to say two things. You don't need to know a lot of programming or have all these skills. You just really have to know what you want out of these systems, or how you don't want to be adversely affected, and be able to communicate that with others, whether that be policymakers or model developers or things like that. I know from the Generative Red Team event at DEF CON, which I was a part of, which was focused on safety, it was the biggest audience I've seen applied in one area. 2,000 people who, a lot of them didn't have technical or programming or all those sorts of backgrounds, but they were still able to come and contribute and express their opinions. And it was quite powerful, I have to say. It was really interesting hearing from folks in community colleges and from different backgrounds about when they use these models, how they make them feel, or what they see as beneficial or potentially harmful for themselves. And you can also be that person, right? You don't have to go read this whole guidebook. Just really think about, as this technology comes, how would you like to see it represented to yourselves, your family, and your society? And then just be a part of the discussion, whether that's the discussion with um, model builders who are building models, or your local elected representatives, or government representatives and the such. So I super encourage folks to think about AI safety. Um, Thank you, Nitesh, for that comment. All right, so for the coming weeks, I know this week was a little different in that we didn't cover a lot of code. It was mostly concepts. And I don't want to say it was softer, but more, definitely not any code, because we didn't cover any code here. So I know this particular book club is very wide-ranging, more wide-ranging than the other book clubs we had for causal inference and state space models. So I'm going to be asking everyone, emailing out the list, like, what just would you like to see? There's so many topics to cover that I would be happy to take suggestions for what we should do for the next particular sessions. Off the top of my head, what I'm thinking is that I finish writing the fine-tuning section and the evaluation sections. I'll do my best to think through these and put more compelling content to make this particular portion useful. By default, if I don't hear anything, we're gonna talk about fine tuning in particular. There's a lot of strategies for fine tuning, from reinforcement learning with human feedback, supervised fine tuning, preference models, constitutional AI. There's a bunch of different methods like LoRa, which I'm forgetting I just want to look it up because it's gonna bother me. It's called LoRa. I think it's like low-ranked adaptations of language models. So there's prompt fine-tuning, or I should say prompt tuning, which is, people argue whether that's really tuning or not. Context distillation, which is another one. Model distillation, not model distillation maybe, because we won't talk about that one. It's not so much fine-tuning. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in fine-tuning. So if no one has a stronger idea, that will be the default topic. But if not, if someone has a super strong feeling and it seems compelling to me, we'll go with that. Nonetheless, I will send out an email asking what everybody would like to do, because we're at a point in the book club where we've done the model basics. We've talked about model evaluation. Now we've talked about safety. There's a lot of directions we can go with the fundamentals. So super curious what's useful for you. This is always useful for me because I am always learning every time I have to write this material. So I appreciate all of your encouragement and you coming, because then it becomes doubly valuable. But for that, that's all I have for today. I'm going to leave it open for questions. So I'll sit here for about 15 seconds because that's how long it takes for the stream to catch up with where you are. Anything in particular you want to talk about, questions you want to ask me? We have 20 minutes, so I'm happy to do a Q&A session today, because rare occurrence where we don't go over the hour. While I'm waiting, I will tease. I have really exciting news for myself personally in terms of my career development at Google and the field of artificial intelligence. So I don't want to spoil anything right now, but by the time we get to the next book club, I could share a little bit more about what I'll be working on. There's a lot of exciting things going on in this space. I genuinely am. I know today was a tougher session with safety and risk, but I genuinely do think these technologies and the idea of using mathematics to improve people's lives is, like, to me, the most exciting thing that's out there. Again, whether it's building rockets or whether it's building these computational systems, mathematics helps in so many different areas. So it's so fascinating to me to see it continue to build wonderful experiences like video games, but also technologies like this, which help sort of organize and make accessible all sorts of different human knowledge. I don't see any other questions, so I know this is for folks at 8 a.m. in Pacific time on a Sunday, this is tough, and for folks in the APAC, it's tough as well. So if you have anything, you can always leave a comment on LinkedIn or YouTube where I'm streaming this and ask. Nitesh wants to ask about my course on Gaussian processes. Okay. Nitesh, ask you if you have any specific questions. Go ahead and ask. We're gonna take a detour now and talk about my other fun part on my broader interests in sorry, can't type it. Intuitive. Can't type and talk at the same time. We'll talk about my broader interest in applied computational mathematics. So, independent of this Intuitive AI book club, I have this organization called Intuitive Bays, where me and a bunch of my friends, we build courses. This is closer to what we had originally started the book club with, which are, I'll call them smaller artificial intelligence models, but definitely smaller models. Same principles though, of probability, same tools like JAX and things like that. But it focuses on specific model types, and in particular, Bayesian estimation. So to answer your question directly, to give folks a little bit more context, there are 4 courses. One of them is released right now, which is the introductory course. We're working on 2 more actively, which is advanced regression and practical MCMC. So these are, I don't know if my stream is frozen, but hopefully you can see my screen. These are deeper dives into particular model types. So linear regression, this one being that one. This one is actually not a model, I should have said that, but an estimation technique called MCMC. And in the modern Bayesian world, MCMC is a way to estimate parameters and figure out, actually it's just that, estimate parameters in your model. Nitesh's question is, will it be available soon on Intuitive Bayes? I think the current version is under development. So Nitesh, it is available right now. Lessons 1 and 2 are available for free. So you can go in and just sign up. And I probably should change this buy now button to say sign up, but it is totally free. 1 and 2 are completely free. We're taking feedback. So if you haven't taken these, if you haven't done this, you haven't watched these, and you're interested in Gaussian processes, I highly encourage you to do so. In terms of future development, to get to your precise question, Nitesh, I'm going to finish off advanced regression and practical MCMC first. These are almost out. They should be out later this year, hopefully no later than the end of November or December. We want to finish these off, get them wrapped up, and get them released. And then I'll probably flip back to Gaussian processes, in particular, developing out probably 2 or 3 more lessons within that particular course. To give you some context, it is really hard to figure out how to make Gaussian processes intuitive in the manner that Intuitive Bayes does. So it has been rough. We were going back and forth about different ways to make it easy without making it too complex. We weren't able to quite figure it out yet, which is why we put it on pause. I'm going to get back to it later this year, probably late November, December, and I'll have more information for you then about the development timelines and what we plan with it next. In the meanwhile, though, I want to leave you with 2 references, just so you know. A really great guy, Quan Nguyen, who I know personally, he just finished his book on Bayesian optimization in action. It is quite a good book. I got to read this book. As a technical reviewer, and I really, really enjoyed it. He uses PyTorch, and he provides really good examples and a really intuitive explanation of how these things work. He also is a PhD in stats, so he's a super smart guy, knows what he's talking about. This is a great book to read about Gaussian processes, so I suggest that one. And then I also suggest the Gaussian process material that's on the PyMC repo and website. So that one's written in notebook style and is a documentation, but it also is quite good, and it will get you started immediately more than anything else. Hopefully I answered your question, Nitesh. I also gave you a bunch more of information as well. So let me know if that helps. good to know that there's people in both worlds. I'm always curious what the overlap is between the people that are in the Intuitive AI book club and then the Intuitive Bayes courses. Awesome. Any other questions or anything else I can answer? I'll wait another 10 seconds now to see if anybody else has anything. Going once, going twice. All right, folks. So between both topics, quite frankly, between probabilistic estimation in the Bayesian world and between newer artificial intelligence development, there's so many fascinating things going on. Um, it's just a really interesting, a really great time whether you're into Gen AI or not to get into computational mathematics. I'll say in general, there's just so many tools. They're so available. They can solve so many problems. Like even just Bayesian estimation. If we talk about that for a second, in the last 20 years, with newer tools like MCMC, you can more easily come to better approximations of so many different things, whether it's drug dosage delivery, like I've seen, supply chains and rockets, which is what I use them for, mixed media model marketing, causal inference. Like, it's just too many things to talk about. I know the book club is focusing on AI right now, but it is like such a great time to use mathematics to improve the world. So I'm really excited to see folks show up to this particular book club looking that have the same interest as me, and then also just the development all over the space, from AI related stuff, ML related stuff, statistics, so on and so forth. All right, we usually go over, so let's end this one early at 44 minutes. Super appreciate you guys. I think in about 3 weeks will be the next session to keep the Intuitive AI book club rolling. If you're interested in Intuitive Bayes, you can go to the website, which I guess I will link it here as well for folks to grab that. I didn't put that. But thank you again for another session. I hope everyone has a wonderful Sunday, and I'll see you in the book club in a couple of weeks.